Hi there, welcome to Caffeine TV. I'm your host Konishma_developer and this is episode 5 of the Kodular Basic series. Today we're taking a look at component properties. In the last episode we already discussed the setters and the getters, and what we're going to discuss today is critical to fully understanding the setters and the getters. Without further ado, let's get started. Currently we have screen 1 selected, and on the right panel you can see the screen 1 properties. First, the common properties are listed and then the advanced properties are listed. If I click here, you'll see the advanced properties for screen 1. You'll notice if I click button 1 here, the properties are different, and also the advanced properties are different. The exact properties that are going to be available depend on the specific components. If I return to screen 1 for now, let's just quickly go through some of the properties. First up, we have about screen. Anything we write here will show up above the created with Kodular text in the about this application pop-up. Let's just write here, this is PR1. And when we'll test this out next, you'll see this is PR1 written in the about screen pop-up. Next up we have the background color. You'll notice that this is the color you see when the about screen light theme is turned off. And just as we're discussing that, the third property is about screen light theme. You can check and uncheck this one. And then we have the title. It is about this application by default, but you can make it whatever you want. Next up, the accent color. This shows up in many places, including your pop-up button color, your scroll bars, your text box underlines, etc. Basically, it should complement the primary color of your app, and you should just make sure that it looks good. That's what matters in the end. Next up, align horizontal, align vertical, and app name. These two control the placement of components in screen 1. If I set this to center, you'll notice that the components are center aligned right now. And if I set this to center, the components are now in the middle of the screen. We'll set this back to left and top. And for app name, it's what you see in your phone's application launcher, the drawer, wherever your app icon appears. However, note that some launchers allow shortcuts to be renamed, but this is what your app will actually be called. And yeah, the name can't be changed in settings, so if you were to go into settings and then applications, this name would be there. Background color, it controls this color. So if I were to make this lime, you'll see that the screen is on lime. I'll set this back to white because a lime screen doesn't quite look good in my opinion. But of course it depends on what components you have on screen, and lime doesn't complement the default button and the default label. With some other stuff on screen, it just might look good. The only way to find out is for you to go and experiment with it. If you do come up with something that looks good, hit me up, share it on Telegram or mail me. I'll be glad to see someone creating good looking screens with a lime background. Enough talking about lime. We'll continue with the different properties we have here, with the next one being background image. This sets an image as the screen background instead of a solid color. We don't have any image in our app's assets right now, and yeah, we haven't discussed assets yet, but we'll get there. Next, the close screen animation. You can set it to fade, zoom, slide horizontal, slide vertical, etc. Setting it to default will let your device make the choice. For your app icon, again, you have to have an image in your app's assets and then set it to the icon. It will show up in settings and the launcher, same deal as the app name. Navigation bar color, it's this color right here, and with the introduction of gesture bars, this is slowly getting outdated, but in many devices the navigation bar is still there and many users actually prefer the navigation bar. So you should make sure that it also looks good and ties in with the rest of your app's user interface. Open screen animation, again same choices as close screen, but we'll just leave it on default now. Primary color, title bar. This is this color. Not much else to say, we'll just move on. Primary color dark / status bar, and it's this color. Receive shared files. This is a very cool feature recently introduced in Kodular. You can check one or more of these boxes or none of these boxes if you don't want it, and it will let your app show up in your phone's share menu, and it will let other apps share files to your app, and then you can use the corresponding event handler to do what you want with the files. Screen orientation. This controls the orientation your app appears in when you open the app. Setting it to full sensor will let your app auto rotate. Setting it to sensor portrait will let it auto rotate, but only when it's portrait, so 0° and 180°. Sensor landscape will be 90 and 270, and there are a lot of other options. You can just experiment with these and see what works best for your app. I personally tend to use sensor portrait because that's what works best with my designs. Next up, scrollable. This should be checked if you want your user to be able to scroll down the screen to discover more content. Usually it's a better idea to have scrollable arrangements in the screen because scrollable screens do rule out some stuff like the vertical alignment property. Theme. We have already discussed this during the app creation process. You can set it to default, light or dark. We'll leave it on default now. Again, experiment with it, see what works best for you. Title. It's this text right here. We'll leave it on screen 1, but just for the sake of demonstration, we could also make this PR1 and you'll see the change reflected here. Title bar font typeface. You can change it if you want, so we could make this monospaced for example, and you'll see it just change here. We'll leave this on default and move on with the title bar subtitle. It's empty by default, but you could make this anything you want actually. You'll see a subtitle just appeared here, and yeah, that's it pretty much. We could make this monospace and you'll see the subtitle is also affected by the same property. We'll clear the subtitle, and we could also make the title bar not appear at all, but keep in mind it will also turn off the options menu. This has the about screen by default, and you could also add menu items after the menu is initialized. We'll discuss this in future videos as well. And there's also the show status bar option, which of course controls the status bar. If you were to hide it, your users would have to swipe down from the top of the screen to view the status bar, and it is useful in some types of apps where you want to maximize your screen real estate. So for example, if I were to turn off the show status bar and the title visible, I have the whole screen available, except you might notice the navigation bar is still there, but you can't disable it. Yeah, we're almost done. As I said, I won't be discussing every single property right now because we will have dedicated videos for every single component and we will cover all properties then. But just for comparing components and their properties, let us take a look at button 1 for some time. First up, we have background color. It's this color right here. Enabled, it controls whether you can click the button or not. Font bold, pretty self-explanatory. Font italic, also pretty self-explanatory. We'll uncheck both of these and go into font size. It's 14.0 by default. You can make it 16.0, or if you don't like decimals, you can just make this an integer. As long as it's a number, it will work. This brings us nicely to the concept of data types in properties. If you have noticed, not all the properties are controlled in the same way. Some are text boxes, Some are color pickers, some are checkboxes, some are drop downs, and some even have even more options allowing you to upload files, preview the file, or select files from your assets. And then you also have these ones where you have a drop down but it doesn't have a number associated like the alignment properties. So the data types associated with these are text, color, boolean, that's true or false, also known as logic in Kodular. This is color again. This is a number actually, and you'll see the associated numbers when you click the drop down. So if you were to set align horizontal to 3 while the app is running, all the components on the screen would be center aligned. And this is actually a text, but it just behaves differently in the designer itself. In the blocks area, you could just set it to something.png or something.jpg, it would work. Let's go ahead and change the property right now that would make PR1 much better. I'll click label 1 here, go into the text property, change this to 5. There we go, much better. Now if I go into blocks and just to demonstrate how the data types are enforced, we'll take button 1 font italic, button 1's image, button 1's height, the enabled property, touch color, it's the color of the ripple you see when you click the button, and we'll take screen 1's align vertical property. Now if I were to try and make this left as in with a string, you'll see I can't plug in the text block, but if I will take a math number block, it will get plugged in. So I could set this to 2. As a recap, to see what 2 would do in this case, we'll go to the designer, screen 1, align vertical, and 2 would be center in this case. Button 1's touch color, can we make this a text? No. Can we make this a number? You will see we can. That's because every single color here can be represented numerically. But if you don't know the actual number associated with the color in Kodular, don't mess with it. Just use a color block and drag it here. If you want to create it from the RGB components, you could also use this, since you can plug any gray block here. So that would include the make color block. Next up, for the button 1 enabled, let's try a 0. You'll see we can't do it. What about an empty text? Again, no. That's because we need a logic block. For button 1's image, let's just reuse a text block because littering the workspace is bad. You'll see we can set it to a text. Can we set it to a number? Yes, we can. This is because numbers can act as texts. However, because you can't have an extension written in this number block, it won't work properly. So just use this and we'll make this something.png. Something.png doesn't exist in the app's assets, and if you're curious, the assets are empty. Going over to font italic, it's again a boolean, and height, as you can see, won't accept texts. So you can't set it to 20% with the person sign written here like this. No, it won't work. For that, you would have to use the different property known as height percent. Both height and height percent, both of these are of the number data type, and yup, that does it. Unlike the other episodes where I keep the blocks area intact between episodes, I will clean this up because it's really messy right now. However, you don't need to witness me cleaning up this workspace. I'll just leave this here and I'll see you next Friday with another Kodular Basics video. Drop a like if you liked the video, share and subscribe to help the channel grow, and let me know down in the comments what you want to see. As always, I really appreciate feedback. Thanks for watching and happy coding.